Hello, yes, say good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you at not only the end of the penultimate week of the NFL season, but also the end of the year, because I am recording this on New Year's Eve. Which actually does bring me to my first point. I should apologise. I did say that I may or may not record last week with it being Christmas Eve. Just didn't have time with everything going on with the family. I hope you can understand that. But we are back recording at the regular time slot and ready for you to listen to on either Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, depending on when it is that you listen to this. Right, before we get into the actual show, though, I do need to do the admin, which is as simple as saying thank you very much for listening. And don't forget that if you are new listener, then on top of this, you can also like and subscribe on our social media channels. They are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And then on Twitter, we are at MRB Sports Media. And yeah, go give a like, give a follow, give a subscribe, hit the bell notification, whatever it is you need to do to keep getting notified on when this is going to be being released and all the other content as well. Then just give a little follow over there on those relevant platforms. And then if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for continuing to make me and this show a very, very small part of your week. I believe that's everything. Yes, that is it. So with that being said, let's dive right into the first topic of the week. And this one, unsurprisingly, if you've been listening to me all season, know just how much this situation not so much irks me, but how fascinated I have been in the. Yeah, I will admit there is an element of Schadenfreude around this, but surrounding the New York Jets and the absolute catastrophe that has been. And we need to start off with reports that Garrett Wilson, star wide receiver, obviously offensive rookie of the year when he first came in, that all is not well between him and quarterback Aaron Rodgers, with Ian Rappaport reporting that if Aaron Rodgers comes back for next year, that Garrett Wilson does not want to be back next year, which I think kind of exemplifies exactly where Aaron Rodgers is at this state of his career. And again, I'm not going to, actually, no, I will say it does hurt him when it comes to his discussion about his legacy, because if you look at all the older quarterbacks, in their final years, they, the most famous older quarterbacks at least were some level of productive. You look at what Brett Favre did with the Minnesota Vikings. No, at least took them to an NFC Championship game in his, you know, in his old state. Peyton Manning in his last year with the Broncos was not the most effective, and needed the help of the defense to help him get through it, but helped guide the Denver Broncos to a Super Bowl. Tom Brady, obviously the most famous in his final season. Again, the last year was perhaps the worst, but I think the Buccaneers team was not the greatest around him. But even in his old age, took the Buccaneers to a Super Bowl and won it. So when you look at what old quarterback or older quarterbacks have done, and then you look at what Aaron Rodgers is doing, it will, I think, hurt his legacy, because there will be some people who thought, hey, these old quarterbacks could do it when they were old. Why can't you? And you look at what Aaron Rodgers has done this season. He is not the MVP player that the Jets thought they were going to be getting. And if I'm Garrett Wilson, I totally get that. He's still got some level of control and will be with the New York Jets, you imagine, for some time, or at least there's a chance of him being around for 10 years with the team. So if he thinks that someone like Aaron Rodgers is holding him back and he wants to win a Super Bowl, somewhere, or somewhere else, then I think he's quite right to exercise that, because Aaron Rodgers has held the New York Jets back multiple years as a result, of him being there. So really, it does come down to the New York Jets, and are they really willing to, break this off? There's been some suggestion from Aaron Rodgers that he does want to play next season. But if I'm the Jets, do you really want to do that? Do you really think that this is the guy? Not even just his on the field performance, but everything that's gone on off the field and his influences behind the scenes, getting rid of the head coach when it appears to be obvious it was not his fault that things were going the way that they were. Again, some of his off-field antics and the bad press that's going to bring around that as well. Do you really want to have Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, or do you want to start again? Because if you keep Aaron Rodgers and he performs, then that puts you back another year. I do think it is time for the New York Jets basically to have a complete reset. At the two key positions, obviously head coach is one of them, and I will be touching on head coaches in a second. But quarterback is the obvious one. Why stick around with Aaron Rodgers when he has proven in his 2 years that he is not what you expect Aaron Rodgers to be? So why stick around with him any longer when you can, at least try again? And there's a couple of decent quarterbacks, or at least decent prospects coming up in the NFL draft. Why not try for one of them? Maybe they'll invigorate something in the New York Jets as a franchise and take you forward. You at least have to take the chance. But I think even more so, I think in terms of the head coaching, I think there needs to be a culture reset, and that brings us on to the next point, which is the news that, well, one of them is news, one of them is speculation. I'll start with the news first, and that is the news that, according to Tom Pelissero, Ron Rivera, former head coach of the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Redskins / Commanders, because he was there during that whole transition period thing, it has emerged as a potential candidate for the head coaching role, obviously. And then the other one that's sort of emerging again, somewhat speculation, nothing really, is Rex Ryan. Now, both coaches, I think, are different kinds of coaches when it comes to their overall styles. Rex Ryan, we know what he is. He's a big personality, big guy, but there is some element of discipline when it comes from him and take no nonsense. Ron Rivera, same sort of thing, but just a little less louder about it, a lot more quieter when it comes to him. And if I'm being brutally honest, of the two of those two, there will be other candidates, I'm sure. Once the Detroit Lions season is over, I'm sure Ben Johnson will have his chance to be interviewed by a certain amount of teams, and the Jets, I imagine, will be one of the teams as well. There'll be other coordinators again in and around the league that will have their names thrown into that hat as well. But in terms of former head coaches, let's just focus on Ron Rivera and Rex Ryan. Neither of them rather, will put up with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you look at how Rex Ryan has eviscerated the New York Jets over the course of the season. Do you think he's going to be putting up with Aaron Rodgers? I don't think so. And again, Ron Rivera, you looked at the sort of quarterbacks he's had in his time in the NFL and how he's handled them. I don't think he's going to put up with Aaron Rodgers either. So the New York Jets really do have to make a decision. Are they going to keep Aaron Rodgers and keep that culture, or are they going to do a complete 180 and bring in someone with a little bit more discipline and a little bit more control over the situation? I think that's not unfair to call it control. Now, obviously, it's probably a case of you definitely can't have one without the other. I doubt it's going to be a situation where Aaron Rodgers will be leaned on to say, okay, which of these two head coaches do you want to have? I don't think this is going to be something where they lean on him to, like, he's had a say in the offensive coordinators and getting them sorted out and whatever. The ownership will probably go over his head over this. And if it were to be one of those two, if I were to lean, I would lean Ron Rivera. I just think Rex Ryan coming back, I think he's just a little bit too brash. And I think the New York Jets have probably learned they probably don't want as much of a media circus around them. So if it were to be one of those two, I'm not saying it's definitely going to be one of those two, but if it were, I think it would be Ron Rivera. I think Ron Rivera comes in and one of his first decisions is to get rid of Aaron Rodgers. I think that's it. I think that's the smart decision, and then take someone in the draft, learn to develop them, maybe even trade for someone. I've mentioned in the past couple of weeks how funny it would be if Sam Darnold, for instance, came back, and we'll be touching on Sam Darnold later in the show. But whatever you decide to do, I don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback of the New York Jets next season. And good for the New York Jets if they do decide to do that, because it's just been a complete circus pretty much from day one. And off the field and on the field, it has just not worked out. As I've said, set the franchise back multiple years. Not just these two, but possibly a couple of more because of how they would have drafted and all that sort of stuff. So they need a complete reset. Aaron Rodgers goes. Someone like Ron Rivera comes in to reset, just do the whole thing. And with that, I think Garrett Wilson will want to stay. But as the report says, it's basically going to be one or the other. Garrett Wilson has more of a sway and more of a future, I think, with the New York Jets. So I think they will lean with him, and Aaron Rodgers will go. I think that's the obvious way, and I think that's what exactly will happen. Right, and moving on from someone who used to be MVP in Aaron Rodgers to this year's MVP debate, and I want to start by saying that. Well, let's start with the four names who are the most prominent, shall we say, when it comes to discussion. That is Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Saquon Barkley. Now, again, there may be some who want to maybe throw Jared Goff in there, who maybe want to throw Sam Darnold in there, for instance. But if I just look at the betting odds right now, so Josh Allen is minus 300. That means in Americanized terms, you need to bet 300 in order to make $100. So he's the clear favorite. Lamar Jackson is plus 225, so you bet 100 to win 225. Joe Burrow is plus 1,600, and Saquon Barkley is also plus 1,600. So those are the main four. Again, you may want to put Jared Goff or Sam Darnold or Patrick Mahomes again. Somehow underlooked in all of this. I mean, he's not had the best season, but he still led the Chiefs to the number one seed in the AFC. And any quarterback who's the main man in it should always be in some level of consideration for it. But either way, he's not going to win it this year. But I think we're at a stage where I don't think anyone can really complain. And I think it's a good thing if any of the four were to win it. I think there is a compelling case for every single one of them. Josh Allen, whether it's with his arm or with his legs, has just been an absolute machine this year for the Buffalo Bills, and they would not be in the same situation, without him. I think that's pretty obvious to say. Lamar Jackson has had a lot of help. With Derrick Henry and an incredible defense. And again, I'm not taking that away from Lamar Jackson, but in terms of the weaponry around him, I think Josh Allen has probably had to do slightly more with slightly less. So I think that's why he sort of nudges ahead there. Joe Burrow, sort of a different one, because if you look at what most valuable player is, I've always interpreted it as similar to the Time Magazine Man of the Year, or Person of the Year rather, and how their reward goes to the person who, for better or worse, has influenced the news story of the year. I've always considered MVP to be in a similar sort of bracket, that you can be good, but also how do you look when you are not on the field? Sort of thing. Through your action or inaction, how valuable are you to your team? And when it comes to Joe Burrow, I don't think anyone can argue that Joe Burrow is the most valuable player to his team. The Bengals are nowhere without Joe Burrow. You can make the argument that, with the weapons that, especially the running game that the Baltimore Ravens have, I think they would be in a better position than the Bills are. And I think probably than the Bengals are. So there's always that little bit of wiggle room for understanding. So that's why Joe Burrow is understandably in the conversation. Now, Saquon Barkley, I think, is the interesting one. In today's modern NFL, and I said this at the start of the year when it comes to my prediction for the awards, is that MVP is the best quarterback because of how the game is played and how more influential the quarterbacks are compared to previous decades and previous eras. Okay, so which is why I said MVP will be best quarterback, and then Offensive Player of the Year will be to the best non-quarterback. That seems to be how the award has developed in a way. So in a normal year, I mean, and you probably can do this anyway, Offensive Player of the Year goes to Saquon Barkley. I think that's pretty much wrapped up. But when it comes to the MVP race for Saquon Barkley, I think he needs to break the record for him to have that one last chance of MVP. I think it is Josh Allen's to lose at this point. However, if Saquon Barkley breaks Eric Dickerson's record in a passing league, and again, that's something I haven't really seen much debated when it comes to talking about Saquon Barkley and his record. I've seen people talk about how, it's Eric Dickerson's record that he's trying to break, and Eric Dickerson did it in 16 games. Saquon Barkley's got the extra game to do it, and I sort of get that. But we have to caveat that with, this is a passing league. It's more easier to put up yards through the air than it has ever been before, so teams will lean towards passing. So to do all of this for Saquon Barkley in the league he's doing it in a way, sort of takes away the asterisks that people will want to attach to it. So, people will be, Saquon Barkley, if he breaks the record, with an asterisk because he did it in 17 games. Eric Dixon did it in 16 games, whatever. I think that takes the asterisks away, at least in my mind, anyway. So if he does break the record, I think that should be what makes him the MVP, personally. So whatever you want to do this weekend when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I know there's been some discussion of whether they want to sit or whether they want to play him or whether or not he will go for the record, or the fact they don't have the first round bye. I think that would have played a huge part in it. If they had the first round bye, then they could afford to play him a little bit more and then take him out of the game. I still think they should make it go for the record because he will not win the MVP without that record. I don't think. Again, if I had to say, I think it will be Josh Allen at this point. This isn't just going by the betting markets. I think there's sort of an element of the story there as well. People will look around and think, again, yes, Saquon Barkley didn't break the record, so we hold that back. Joe Burrow, yes, a great season. No one's taken that away from him. But in the end, have you ever seen a quarterback win the MVP with that close of a record to 500? Not really. Lamar Jackson, maybe people are tired of him. I think there's an element of a story to Josh Allen that I think will sway some voters. So I think Josh Allen is the favorite to win MVP. But if Saquon Barkley breaks the record, that is what, in a normal world, no context outside whatsoever, that is what should give him the MVP. But anyway, we shall have to wait and see what happens at the end of the season, and when the NFL honors comes around during Super Bowl week. And with that, we move on to our third. I always nearly say our third topic, but this is a bunch of topics. But this is the third section of the show, shall we say? And just a few ones to talk about this week, because again, as we get towards the season, there's a few more dud games that I paid attention to the score, but didn't really pay attention to what was going on during it. So, not really the chance to go into as much depth as previously. So we'll start with the Pittsburgh Steelers and their continuing stumble. Now, obviously, this hits a little bit close to home because I am a Steelers fan, but I think the Pittsburgh Steelers as a whole do have a lot of questions to answer, especially given how Mike Tomlin has in the past said, we know that we like to raise hell in December. Well, they've lost 3 in a row, and again, the scheduling and everything around it, you can make as many excuses as you'd like, but the fact is, if they'd have just won the Baltimore game, all this probably could have been avoided because they'd have locked up the division championship and everyone could be a little bit more understanding and what they really have to fight for. But now they've lost control of that, we'll probably lose it because I can't imagine the Ravens losing to the Browns on Saturday, and as a result, whatever, limping into the playoffs, even if they do manage to somehow scrape past the Bengals, who are the favourites going in. But either way, I think if the Pittsburgh Steelers, as trajectory looks as if they will do, potentially lose 5 games at the end of the season, the final 4 in the regular season, and then the first round playoff game if they go one and done. I genuinely think that might be what tips the organization to move on from Mike Tomlin. I said this towards the end of last year on my channel. I felt that there is the element of he has taken us as far as he can go. I think when you look at some of the results that happen, the one that really got me was the 2 results in 5 days when we lost to the Arizona Cardinals and the New England Patriots. There is the element of, right, yes, we understand he's a good guy. A bit like Mike McCarthy, if you've been listening to my conversations all the way through the season. Good in the regular season, but we pay you for the postseason. And if you haven't won a postseason game in how long, and you haven't won a Super Bowl in how long, and all that sort of stuff, and then you lose the last 5 games, especially if it's, depending on how the seeding works, especially if it's on the road to Houston, the worst of the 4 division champions, and the most winnable game for the Steelers. If you lose, the 4 regular season and then the postseason one, what are we really doing here? When you have players like, generational player like TJ Watt, a generational player like Minka Fitzpatrick, incredible underrated player like Cam Hayward, a potential generational player in someone like George Pickens. You look at what he does. Najee Harris, a brilliant, effective running back, one of the better tight ends in the league in Pat Frymuth. if you have all this talent and you cannot make it work, then what are we doing here? So I think that is what will cause the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they do go one and done in the playoffs, I think that's potentially time for change with the organization. I genuinely think that will happen personally. And speaking of other organizations who are struggling at the end, just found themselves eliminated, is the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I don't think I've talked about the Colts much over the course of the season, but when Pat McAfee goes on the tirade that he did over the week, I urge you to go on social media to find out to look at the rant. Even go and look at his show on YouTube to get his explanation of it. Absolutely incredible stuff. But the way he eviscerated the Indianapolis Colts for their performances this season, I genuinely think is a big moment for the Colts as an organization and what they want to do moving forward. Because when you lose the support of someone, not necessarily as famous, but as, prominent in the media as Pat McAfee, the fact that Peyton Manning, in most of his stuff, appears to be doing more with the Broncos than he is with the Colts, kind of says something. And now you've got a very, very prominent media personality in Pat McAfee turning on you. Sort of shows you that the Indianapolis Colts are on their way down as a franchise. You may think they're on their way up, with Anthony Richardson and the potential he has. But if you are losing the support like this, then just the overall culture and the, aura around the team, you can't carry on like that. So I'm not going to say this is going to force Jim Irsay to sell the team, but I think it is going to cause him to make some major, major changes when it comes to how things are done and how things are run within the organization. But again, the whole point of it, go and read what Pat McAfee said. I also think this is a chance for more prominent people to do that. We've seen former players and even current players make snide comments, just on social media, just a one line post on their Instagram saying how unhappy they are. If we can get more prominent and more, ex players and media personalities to go on the sort of rants that Pat McAfee did, I think that could potentially be a huge thing for teams moving forward, because they are effectively voicing the opinions of some of the fans, who don't have the voice that these people do, and they will affect change more so than anybody else. The fans can complain on social media, but when a prominent ex-player does something like that, that really will make owners stand up and pay attention, if it were. So more of that, please. If I'm being brutally honest, keep it up, and hopefully, more teams will be better as a result of it. Now, speaking of teams that the Colts are a team on the way down. Now I want to talk about a team on the way up, and who could potentially be the number one seed in the NFC this year, and that is the Detroit Lions, the team who I've said all year are everyone's second favorite team because of how the story and again the culture that they sort of bring and the entertainment factor in there as well. But it's the entertainment factor that I want to talk about. Now, last night against the San Francisco 49ers, they pulled out yet another trick play. And this has become a thing with the Detroit Lions over the past couple of weeks. Just made a note. The hook and ladder against the 49ers on Monday Night Football. The fumble touchdown against the Bears. I think that's the best way to sort of put, where they pretended to fumble the ball, then, wide receiver wide open to get a touchdown. And then the offensive tackle, Skipper, scored the touchdown against the Bills. All these trick plays coming out. I just worry about the Detroit Lions, whether or not they are showing too much too soon. I mean, it's great that they are this innovative and whatever, and Ben Johnson, again, will get his credit for it. But I wonder why he's doing it at the time now, because surely you want to keep all of those in your back pocket for when you desperately need them in the postseason. Why are you showing us that this can happen now and give teams at least a little bit of a taste of what could happen? If the Lions fumble the ball, for instance, in their first round playoff game, whoever that may be against, our team's going to be, cognizant of that. And if there's a fumble, just tell their players to stick on the wide receiver because they know that there's a potential of a trick play. All this sort of thing. Hook and ladder, are they going to be a little bit more disciplined in their zone or man coverage when it comes to how they deal with players catching the ball? All that sort of stuff. Are they going to make sure that on, whenever Dan Skipper is the eligible receiver, keep a man on him. Have they given themselves away too much rather than keep all of these hidden for when they desperately need them? No, it's just a weird thing for me again. Even if they'd have just played one, for instance, if they'd have just pulled up one of these plays, I think that would have been fine. But to use all three like these, in the time span that they have, I think it's just a very, very potentially dangerous move for them. And they, as I said, potentially given the game away on a number of their plays. So that very may well come back to bite them in the future they if they pull a trick play, but someone's able to snap onto it and prevent it as a result because they've already seen it. So just a little bit wary if I were the Detroit Lions over their use of the trick plays in the future. Right, and with the podcast wrapping up, we need to go into the final segment of the day, and this is the one taking away from the NFL. And as I always like to do, I wanted to keep this in completely different sports, but the college football world has brought up so much this season. I just can't not dive back into it, if you know what I mean. And this one is the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And again, I'm sure you've all seen the media hype, and that's sort of what I want to talk about. The Pop-Tarts Bowl have done it right. How many if you are a college football fan, you probably have got a little bit annoyed with bowl season and what it does and how it doesn't represent anything much anymore. It used to be the big four, the big six playoff bowl. The Rose, the Fiesta, the Sugar, the Orange, the Peach, and the Cotton Bowl. I think I've routed them all off. It used to be just those ones, and those were the prominent ones. But then, as it sort of gets diluted down, and you get these weird ones. Again, I'm not disparaging them in any way, but the weird ones like the Bahamas Bowl, where it's a 6-6 team from the MAC. I'm not even sure if these are the right teams, but you know what I'm following. You know what I'm doing here. But like a 6-6 team from the MAC against a 7-5 team from Conference USA, whatever. All these weird. It sort of dilutes it, and it used to be a prestigious thing. Now it's just you just have to be over 500 to be part of it, and all that sort of stuff. But the Pop-Tarts Bowl and the noise and the media attention that has gone around it, again, for what is a pretty low-hanging, bowl game, in the grand scheme of things, what is a pretty low one, I think signifies what bowl season needs to be. Bowl season needs to be fun. Again, it shouldn't just be just trudging out and being another game. And again, we've seen all the problems with the transfer portal and teams wanting to, players wanting to leave and coaches leaving. And is it really the the team that goes there? Is it really them? If half the team is already in the transfer pool and doesn't want to play, and the head coach isn't the head coach that got them there because he's already taken another job, all these sorts of things. But with the Pop-Tarts Bowl, they have brought the fun back into the college football bowl season. I don't think there's anyone that can really argue with that. And for those of you who don't know, the Pop-Tarts are the sponsor of the bowl, but the way that they have dominated social media as a result, with fans picking which the edible mascot has been fantastic. Last year and this year, the fact that the trophy now has a built-in toaster for you to make Pop-Tarts, just absolutely incredible. And moving forward, I think it is going to be the most prominent non-Big Six New Year's Bowl whatever game that everyone is going to look forward to, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, because of the hype and the fun that surrounds it. And I think that should be a challenge for everyone else. Make your bowl games fun, and everyone will want to. How many teams are going to look to say, I want to be in the Pop-Tarts Bowl now? I don't want to be in the, for the sake of the argument, the Pinstripe Bowl, for instance. I've just got the list of bowls up here, and the ones that are affiliated to the various conferences. The Pinstripe Bowl for the ACC or for the Big 12, the New Mexico Bowl. To pick another, the Holiday Bowl in San Diego for the ACC, Big 12, the Liberty Bowl in Memphis. I don't want to be involved in them. I want to be involved in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. How many people are going to do that? Are you going to see people clamoring to play in, again, all those bowls I mentioned, the Birmingham Bowl for the ACC? Make your bowl game something that people will want to take part in. That's just my edge. If you want to get, people are saying the college football is in a bit of a weird place because of NIL. Some people are losing love for the game. But doing stuff like that to get love back in will be just a simple, easy way to make people fall in love with college football again. Make your bowl something that people want to go to. That's just my message. That is my end of year message, and that is my end of show message. Because we have reached the end of the show, and we've reached the end of the year. So I pretty much, it just leaves me to say, as always, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, and all our social media channels, which for the last time is at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And on Twitter, we are at MRB Sports Media. So if you're new, if you're returning, as always, go follow them, go whatever needs to be done on whatever platform. And thank you as always for listening. And as as is the end of the year, I'm not going to go on to some big, pontification New Year's message. Just I hope you've had a great 2024, and I hope the 2025 is just as good for you. And if you haven't had a good 2024, I hope the 2025 is better for you. I don't think I could really sum up, give a better message or a simpler message than that to end the year and to end the podcast. So, depending on when you're listening to this, if you listen to this on Tuesday night, then as always, stay safe on New Year's because things can be a little bit, risky and dangerous and whatever. With just make sure you're safe and responsible and everything. And if you're listening to this on the first or after that, then as always, just stay safe and take care of yourself through the new year and the rest of the new year period. So, until next time, take care, and one more time, Happy New Year.